Hey everybody, welcome on our channel. In this video we are gonna see, what if Naruto was the emperor of the galaxy and got harem? Part 1. Huge shout out to Lucius Walker for this story. If you are new on the channel, don't forget to subscribe our channel and like the video too. So without wasting any more time, let's start the story. Ugh, that funking hurt. Naruto Uzumaki was lying on his back, feeling weak from his battle with Sasuke at the Valley of the End. Sasuke. Feeling some of his strength returning, he struggled to get up, blinking blinding stars out of his eyes. Groaning, he eventually got onto his feet before looking around. Okay, where the hell am I? It didn't take long for Naruto to realize that he was not at the Valley of the End. Where there should have been an abundance of trees and fresh water, there was nothing at all. At first he thought he ended up in Suna, but he quickly remembered that the sand and dirt there wasn't orange. Hello? He cautiously shouted out, hearing nothing but the dry wind and his dying echo. Clearing his dry throat, he tried again, only to hear nothing in response. Okay, seriously, where the hell am I? He winced, grabbing onto his chest in pain, as his lungs weren't strong enough to let out a shout like that. Wait a minute, his chest. His fingers fumbling, he quickly opened up his orange jumpsuit, which was pointless, considering how damaged it was. He checked his chest for 2 large holes, only to find that they had healed up quite nicely. Granted, he still felt like shit, but at least he wasn't dying. Despite the warm temperature, he shivered, suddenly feeling very exposed. He decided to finally start walking around, hoping to get help and maybe some directions. Well, that's not spooky, Dadabeo, Naruto commented. After some wandering around, and after running away from dangerous-looking creatures, he found what looked to be an ancient temple of some sorts. The said temple had a lot of dead bodies around it, turned to stone by time, and with large statues looming over him. Their faces were faded from time, but he could still read their somber expressions, eternally etched onto their faces until the end of time. Naruto swung around, his kunai already out in his hand. His breathing quickened, and his heart was racing. Nothing was around him. So why did he hear some whispers? His teeth chattering, he shivered as he finally lowered his arm. Looking around him one last time, he took a deep breath before he stepped into the ruined temple. The temple was cold, dark, and spine-chilling. The whispers seemed to have grown louder, nearly driving the young boy insane, and the air seemed to drop at least 20 degrees, making him shiver and rub his arms to try to feel warm and safe. He spotted some buttons on a control panel, and while even he understood the foolishness of doing this, he began pushing random buttons in hopes of something happening. For better or worse, though, nothing did. Great, the blonde boy thought, no power. After fiddling with the dead control panel for a while, he gave up with a huff and looked around for anything useful to him. Left. What the funk? Naruto spun around again with a kunai in his hands, his nerves shot to hell as he looked around for the source of the whisper. Go left. Holy shit, I think I've gone nuts, Dadabeo, Naruto muttered. Now that he was in the temple, the whispers grew louder and more coherent and thus, more ominous and spine-chilling. He knew it couldn't have been the QB, since even the QB didn't sound that sinister. Just grumpy. Still, he found himself walking down the left hallway. Even though every fiber of his being warned him not to, and even as the temperature seemed to be falling even lower, he kept on going. After all, he had nowhere else to go, and he didn't know where else to go, so at the moment, he had no choice but to listen to the whispers. Oddly enough, the whispers began to grow more comforting as time went by. Perhaps it was because it made him feel less alone, or perhaps it was because it was starting to sound a lot less sinister, but either way, he went from being creeped out to just being a little skeptical. Nonetheless, he pushed forwards, allowing the whispers to be his guide as he wandered through the cold metal labyrinth. Stop. Naruto swore as he nearly ran face first into a stone wall. Muttering some curses at the voices, he looked up and raised an eyebrow at the fact that the voices had just led him into a random wall. Okay, so why am I here, creepy voices? Naruto asked out loud. Surprisingly or unsurprisingly, he got no response and he began tapping his foot in impatience. Oh come on. He roared before he kicked the wall. He swore out loud as he began to hop around, holding his throbbing foot. Focus. Forgetting about his toe for a moment, he looked around for the voice. Focus, young one. Focus with your anger, your determination, your hunger, and search for your guide. Ooh, okay. Naruto breathed out before he sat down. Feeling very stupid, he closed his eyes and began to meditate. Despite Naruto being the hyperactive idiot everyone knows him as, he does pick up a few things here and there, and one of the few things he did pick up from Jiraiya was meditation. Granted, it did take him a while to get used to it, but once he got the hang of it, he found it to be a delightful way to calm his mind. However, meditation was ordinarily used to ease your emotions, not feed into it. Naruto honestly didn't even know how to do it, so he decided to try to channel in his emotions. At first, nothing happened mostly because he didn't know what he was doing. It was only when he was about to scream in anger that he finally got it. Taking a deep breath, he began to focus on his memories. That's him, the demon boy. SHH. You'll get arrested if they hear you. Hokage. He has the nerve to say he wants to be Hokage after he. Why would I ever want to date a loser like you, Baka? His fists began to clench as his breathing began to quicken. His teeth were grinding together as those dark memories began to resurface. Every time those damned civilians looked at him with those eyes. Every time the people around him made him feel worthless. So insignificant. So weak. Did you hear? He failed the academy twice already. Serves it right, though, if you ask me. HMP, you're not worth my attention, dope. And do a simple clone jutsu. And he wants to be Hokage. Pathetic. His emotions, his anger, his frustration, his hatred, they all began to boil inside of him, deep within his core, and suddenly, he felt a boost of power surging through his body and his mind. All of a sudden, the air began to feel hotter, and the mind became sharper, more hyper-focused. His eyes were closed, but he began to see his surroundings. And more importantly, he finally began to see what the voices wanted him to see. Before he knew it, he was on his feet. His eyes still closed, his right hand was outstretched as he touched the cold wall in front of him. The red glow made him open his eyes, and to his amazement, the walls were glowing red. No, that's not right, the walls had text on them that he couldn't see before. It was in a language he was not familiar with, but nonetheless, he knew that he figured it out. The glowing text dimmed out before the wall began to transform, its stone parts breaking away from each other as a small hole was opened. Inside of it was a small glass pyramid which began to glow ominous red. Without hesitation, he seized the forbidden fruit. Greetings, acolyte, much to Naruto's surprise, the pyramid in his hand began talking the minute he channeled his emotions into it. In doing so, the tips of the pyramid began to move and float away from the glowing red pyramid, the tips turning a little in an angle before it began to speak to him. If you are able to open this, I assume that you are here to learn the ways of the Force, yes? Naruto's brain froze, unsure how to respond to all of this. A million questions began racing through his mind. Who was the man speaking on this pyramid? What did he mean by the dark arts of the Force? Did that mean that he was evil? Should he throw this thing away? Or could this thing help Hai? Well, it was just one word, but it forced Naruto to nod before he remembered that he was speaking to a recording. But before he could say a word, the glass pyramid in his hands seemed to be satisfied with his silent answer. Welcome, Naruto Uzumaki. What is it you wish to learn about the mystical arts of the Force? Naruto let out a gulp before he opened his mouth. What is the Force? Naruto forgot all about his pain, hunger, and thirst as he drank in the knowledge this strange device gave him. It told him everything about the Force, the light and the dark, and how both worked. A part of him wondered why it would even tell him about the light, since it seemed rather positively biased for the dark side, and it simply replied that to defeat your enemy, you must understand them, and even learn what they learn, so that you could use it against them. Naruto couldn't really argue against that, since dirty tactics weren't exactly something new for a shinobi. It did get him thinking about which side he wanted to be on, though. From what this holocron, if he remembered correctly, was saying, there were essentially two sides of the Force, the light and the dark, and from what this thing was talking about, he wasn't sure if he was satisfied with one or the other. So, my young acolyte, which side of the Force would you like to learn? Naruto stared at the glowing red holocron for a while, thinking. So from what I'm hearing, the dark side is pretty risky to use, but it does come with a lot of useful powers. On the other hand, the light side is pretty weak in general, and not to mention that the Republic's GD seem to be doing a shitty job on taking care of the galaxy. It was then that a thought occurred to him. Darth Revan-sensei, can I learn both? If the legacy of the masked Sith still had a face, it would have raised an eyebrow. You told me that it's best to learn everything you can, especially about the enemy. From what you've been telling me, it sounds like both the GD and the Sith aren't the best people to rule the galaxy, so in a way, they're both my enemies. Besides, the Sith would definitely want to use me because of QB, and I don't even know what the GD's going to do to me. On top of that, they don't even have real power anymore, since they gave it up to the Republic, and now the galaxy's not in its best shape right now. So can I learn both? The holocron remained silent for a moment. Then, it let out a chuckle. Good, very good, my acolyte. It appears that I have taught you something after all. Yes, I will teach you both sides of the Force. However, the trials will not be easy, and you must be willing to sacrifice everything to obtain power, including what you've been taught is right and wrong. Is that understood? For a moment, Naruto hesitated. Darth Revan sounded pretty serious about the last part, and a part of him wasn't sure if he could go through with it. But what about all the wars your ancestors faced? The dark part of his mind whispered. Your parents didn't exactly have clean hands, you know. And the people you trusted. Kakashi-sensei. Jiji. They did some bad things too in the name of the greater good. If you can't do it, what does that make you? This made Naruto clench his fists. Besides, I think you of all people deserve this. Deserve a chance to become something greater. Deserve the knowledge you've been denied like your parents. Blinking, Naruto then realized that it was the QB that was talking to him. He opened his mouth to tell him to shut up and then he closed them. My parents. The QB grinned. Naruto stumbled onto the cold metal floor, the holocron slipping out of his fingers, where it gently landed on a pile of sand. So you're telling me that my parents weren't nobodies? Naruto stammered, tears welling up in his eyes. And on top of that, the fourth fucking Hokage was my father. Yep. Life sure has a way of kicking you in the teeth, huh? The QB sneered. But if my parents were heroes, then why? Because people are foolish, Darth Revan's holocron chimed in, sounding a little annoyed at being dropped. It's obvious that this third Hokage did not trust you with precious memories of your parents, thinking you were so much of a fool that you would be targeted simply because you would show off your father's name to your enemies like how a bird would do so. But tell me, if that was the real danger, then why wouldn't he teach you personally on how to become stronger? Surely in a civilization where one man's word is law, he could easily make some time for you, could he not? Naruto's words failed him as his brain failed to find ways to excuse his old man. The answer is simple, is it not? The old fool didn't trust you with power, because in the end, he was just as foolish as the others, fearing the things he doesn't understand. Besides, perhaps he enjoyed watching you struggle since from what the QBs told me, his wife was slain during his rampage. You can talk to him? Of course I can, my young acolyte. He's rather fascinating if I must say so, being made of pure raw dark energy and yet being more functional than an average human. In the few moments where you had time to process your emotions, I had a very long pleasant chat with this fine being. Can you tell me more? I'll do you better, Acolyte Uzumaki, I'll show you. It could have been just him, but he thought he felt the holocron twitch towards his direction, prompting Naruto to press the holocron against his head. Before he had time to figure out whether that was such a good idea, he suddenly began to see visions. Visions of the Third Great Shinobi War. Visions of famine, death, hatred and yet, love. His parents' memories, from when they first met to when his father saved his mother. His mother, who grieved the loss of her clan, especially after Konoha did nothing to save them. His mother, whose heart full of hatred was cured by her father's unconditional love for her. Then, tragedy fell upon them. A masked man attacked them, taking him hostage before taking his mother away to free the QB. How joyful the QB felt to finally be free after years of painful imprisonment, only to become the masked man's slave through his mystical eyes of the Sharingan. How the QB know Kurama. How Kurama was forced to attack Konoha. How his father managed to beat the masked man, but he still had to deal with the rampaging Biju. How his parents gave their lives for him so that he could live. That's him, the demon boy. SHH. You'll get arrested if they hear you. Hokage. He has the nerve to say he wants to be Hokage after he. Why would I ever want to date a loser like you, Baka? Stop, Naruto whimpered, shutting his eyes tightly as he held his head. The holocron clattered onto the floor, but the visions continued. Did you hear? He failed the academy twice already. Serves it right, though, if you ask me. HMPH, you're not worth my attention, dope. And do a simple clone jutsu. And he wants to be Hokage. Pathetic. Stop. Naruto yelled, tears pooling down his eyes. His nails began to grow as he unconsciously drew in the QB's power, drawing blood as he dug into his dry scalp. Naruto. Suddenly, he began to see shadowy figures looming above him. Shaking, he slowly looked up and saw two people in front of him. One of them was a blonde, blue-eyed man who looked a lot like him. The other was a beautiful, red-haired woman. Both were bleeding, and both were on the verge of death, with a giant hole in their stomach. Naruto, don't be picky about your food. His mother whispered to him lovingly. Eat lots so you can grow big and strong, okay? And don't stay up late at night, you'll need your sleep. Make friends. I'm not the one to talk, but do your best in school and ninjutsu. Mom? Naruto croaked, his lips trembling as he struggled to hold back tears. I love you, his mother began to cry as she coughed up blood. I love you too, my son, Minato Namikaze managed to say. I'm sorry for putting such a burden on your shoulders. Please, the two of them said in unison. Please work hard to stop the cycle of hatred and suffering. Before Naruto could ask them anything to beg them to stay a little longer, they faded away, quickly being replaced by the villagers. Naruto recognized one of them to be Mizuki, the silver-haired traitor who tried to kill him. That's him, the demon boy. SHH. You'll get arrested if they hear you. Hokage. He has the nerve to say he wants to be Hokage after he killed our beloved Hokage. I'm not Naruto tried to say, but the words just got stuck in his throat, strangled by the glares from the phantoms. You've been lied to by everyone. Mizuki sneered. In his hand was a bloody Fuma shuriken. Didn't you find it odd how everyone hates you? Iruka is the same. He also hates you. Everyone hates you. Everyone. Shut up. He has never known a parent's love and is hated by all the villagers, the third Hokage said solemnly, staring down at Naruto. Nobody will ever love you. So to get attention, he causes a lot of trouble. He wants people to acknowledge his existence in any possible way. Shut up. Naruto. Naruto. Weakling. Loser. Demon Fox. Shut up. Naruto roared, and the temple began to tremble as he let out a wave of power, forcing everything around him to scatter in the wind. Nearby, a metal empty box suddenly began to collapse on itself. Creaking and groaning, the metal protested as an invisible force suddenly began to crush it like paper. It began to float in the air, trembling like it was in pain, until Naruto finally stopped yelling, falling onto his hands and knees, sobbing. Whatever rage was inside of him was gone now, drained out of him like a bag of blood, leaving him as a hollow husk. The ruined box fell onto the floor, but he didn't notice. Why? He whimpered, tears falling onto the dusty floor like rain. Why is this happening to me? It's because you're weak, Darth Revan explained solemnly. One may argue about morality, one may debate all they want about right and wrong, but in the end, the universe only obeys one law. The strong dominate the weak. And you, Naruto Uzumaki, are weak. Your parents were no different, and thus, the universe consumed them. It's a cruel law, but it's the only one. Naruto bit his lips, holding down his sobs. He tasted metal as his teeth dug into his flesh. Tell me, Naruto Uzumaki, what would you do now that you know just where you stand in the universe? Naruto, whose eyes were hollow and lifeless, suddenly began to be filled with light. Turning around, Naruto crawled towards the fallen holocron and went on his knees before bowing, his forehead kissing the floor. Please teach me. Teach you what, my young acolyte? Everything. Please teach me how to be strong. Please help me get stronger so that I can make things right. I don't want to be weak anymore, he gulped, choking down a sob. I want to make things better, but I need to be strong. So please. Please teach me how to be strong. The red holocron glowed brightly as it answered Naruto's prayer. It's been 4 years since he arrived to this strange, new world, and yet, it seemed to go by like a snap. During those 4 years, Naruto Uzumaki changed a lot, both on the inside and the outside. Gone was his short, nutrition-deprived stature, replaced by a tall, muscular body built for battle. He had also long abandoned his childish orange jumpsuit, replaced by black pants, a black shirt, covered by black robes. Was it hot as hell? Sure, but it was what his late master wanted, so that's what he wore. Besides, there wasn't anything else to wear. Clink, 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 clink. A variety of metallic objects hovered in the air. At first glance at its scattered form, it looked to be just a random assortment of trash or spare parts. However, the closer the pieces began floating back together, the more it began to resemble its final form. Peace is a lie. There is only passion. Through passion, I gain strength. Through strength, I gain power. Through power, I gain victory. Through victory, my chains are broken. The force shall free me. Naruto slowly exhaled, creating a flow of hot, dry air of Korriban. Drinking in the natural source of the dark side of the force, the 18-year-old man was meditating on top of a rock. To be more precise, he was meditating above the rock, floating over it using the force alone. Meanwhile, he was being surrounded by various small satellites. Most of them were random rocks or debris, but then there was the particular swarm of tiny metallic pieces that seemed to form a particular object. Naruto then inhaled as he began to quietly recite the next mantra. There is no emotion, there is peace. There is no ignorance, there is knowledge. There is no passion, there is serenity. There is no chaos, there is harmony. There is no death, there is the force. Breathing out, he slowly spat out a wave of cool air, which seemed to settle the planet's grim atmosphere for a moment. Clink, CHK. Clink, CHK. As the rocks continued to orbit the blonde Sith in training in a continuous cycle, the pieces of the random parts of machinery began to assemble, its interchangeable parts slowly forming around a certain piece of crystal. Meanwhile, Naruto Uzumaki remained floating in the air, sitting lotus-style as he continued to meditate. There is no light without the dark. Through passion, I gain focus. Through knowledge, I gain power. Through serenity, I gain strength. Through victory, I gain harmony. There is only the force. Sa. Naruto opened his eyes slowly as he and the rock slowly fell back onto the ground. He looked up to stare at the lightsaber that he had just reconstructed. The plasma sword slowly floated into his awaiting clawed hand. Grabbing onto it, he admired his handiwork for a moment, staring into the red and black light that hummed dangerously from its metallic hilt before deactivating his blade. The Kyber crystal was one of his master's final gifts to him, alongside his knowledge and his new friend. He stared at it with a sad smile, remembering the fond memories he developed with his master. It was silly, but after all this time, he honestly considered Darth Revan to be his father, which was why it broke his heart when he received his final lesson. You have done well, my apprentice, the recording of the Sith nodded approvingly. You've trained your body and mind well, and have grown to be the warrior you needed to be. Now, there is only one thing left to teach you. What is it, master? Naruto asked excitedly. While I've said before that the lightsaber does not make one a Jedi or a Sith, it certainly helps to own one in your quest. Therefore, this is my final gift to you. My life. Destroy the holocron and receive the crystal from within. But you'll die, Naruto stammered, shocked at his final order. All things must perish, my boy, Darth Revan explained sadly. Perhaps you shall be the exception, but in the end, everything has its time to go. I have taught you everything I could, and I only have 3 things left to give you. I've given you my knowledge, and now, I shall grant you these. The location of my prized possession, my heart, the Kyber crystal within this holocron, and the location of your other ally. Now, Uzumaki, strike me down, and learn the true meaning of sacrifice. It honestly shouldn't have been so difficult to do so, but Naruto eventually did as he was ordered to do. The holocron broke easily, shattering after slamming his force-fueled fist onto it. The red glow finally died, and with it, so did the last piece of Darth Revan. Holding onto the crystal, Naruto shed tears for the first time in years, his tears being swallowed by the planet's dirt. Then, just as when he thought he couldn't get lonelier, Kurama decided to give him his gift as well. Staring at his reflection, his red, slitted eyes stared back at him from the hilt of his lightsaber, one of the last remainders of the 9-tailed Bijuu, the being that took everything from him, and yet, the being that gave up everything for him as well. Apparently, the two of them planned for this moment. Darth Revan agreed to give up his life in order to arm his apprentice, and Kurama decided to give his life by merging with Naruto in order to grant him even more power. The process hurt, but it honestly hurt even more when he would go to bed every night and see the Kyuubi's empty cage. Every night, he would walk inside of the empty prison to read Kurama's last message to him. Don't waste sacrifice. Each time he saw that message, he vowed to achieve his goal, no matter what it took. And that's what they were trying to teach him. That mercy, unfortunately, would only hold him back, and that in order to bring peace and stability to the galaxy, he had to be cruel. Okay, that sounded edgy, but still. Query. How are you doing today, my master? Naruto turned and looked at HK-47, who was dragging a crate full of dead Shiraks. Looks like he went hunting again. Doing alright, HK. Doing alright. Query. Are we finally going to Draman cause, my master? Hunting these Shiraks has become rather tedious. Naruto couldn't help but let out a small smile. You got it, HK. Pack your things, cause we're finally leaving the nest. Commentary. Finally. Our conquest for galactic domination begins. Do not worry, I have already packed my belongings. I shall meet you at the Black Sparrow. Right. Naruto watched as the assassin droid, another one of Darth Revan's gifts to him, ran off, abandoning his kills. Naruto glanced at the orange sunset one last time before he began walking towards the black and grey IT-1300 light freighter. His robes shifted as a large orange mass of dark energy grew from his back, resembling a tail. The tips formed into fingers as it grabbed the box. No sense wasting good meat. Commentary. You look just like our late Master Revan, my master. Naruto nodded from underneath his mask. In addition to his dark robes, he was now wearing Darth Revan's Mandalorian helmet, one of his most prized possessions in honor of their late master. It fit him just right, and with it, he honestly felt more complete. Almost. He absent-mindedly touched the broken holocron, which was laying on the beep pit. Agreement. I miss him too, Master Uzumaki. Out of all the masters I've ever served, he was the most interesting one. Naruto let out a sigh before relaxing onto his seat. Watching the hyperspace tunnel around them, his eyes slowly began to close shut. Statement. We have arrived at our destination, Master Uzumaki. Please wake up. Naruto's eyes shot open from underneath his mask. No longer were they in a tunnel of light, zooming across the galaxy faster than the speed of light. Instead, they were right in front of a large blue and green planet. It's a beautiful planet, with its natural greenery rivaling Naboo in terms of beauty and cleanliness. However, they weren't here for sightseeing. No, they were here to recruit a powerful ally. And she was located somewhere on this planet, hidden in a forgotten Sith temple that was abandoned to nature. There it is, Naruto nodded, looking at the lost temple of the Sith through his macro binocular. The dark temple in all of its former glory. Commentary. It is a good thing that the GD Knights have lost this location long ago during the Great Hyperspace Wars, else they would have demolished or built their temple over it. Agreed. I guess studying history did pay off after all. Despite Naruto being eager to learn the ways of the Force, Darth Revan insisted that he learn other subjects as well, which included math, various languages, engineering, and even history. Honestly, learning those subjects was the hardest part of his training, since Naruto was never good at academic learning. History was also the worst for Naruto, since he could understand the importance of the other subjects, but history just seemed to be so blah. Those who do not learn from history are condemned to repeat it, Darth Revan sagely warned him. Besides, the information of the old can help the historians of the present. He never really understood that last part until now. He had been searching for planets that were a part of the previous Sith Empire, but most of them were either in Republic space now or were simply gone, erased from the map or from existence. However, he did find one particular planet that was forgotten by the Republic, but not by Revan. When Naruto finally found the planet from the archives, it activated a recording of his master congratulating him on his hard work, and it could have just been his hopeful, naive self, but his master seemed to smile at him from underneath his helm. That's when he confirmed that Drahman Kaz was indeed the planet he was talking about, where his next ally would be located. Alright, let's see here. Aside from some critters here and there, I don't see nor detect any current dangers or witnesses. Alright, let's go. Naruto put away his macro binoculars and slid down the hill, prompting HK to do the same, albeit with more grace. Cough cough. Wow, the maintenance droids must be dead too, Naruto noted, using the force to blast away the dust. Expletive. The one thing the Sith and the GD had in common was that both were, as meatbags would put it, beep about tidiness. If Darth Revan was still here with us, he would have been disappointed at its current condition. Naruto snorted at HK's sudden foul language before turning his flashlight to illuminate the darkness. Right, let's see, if I memorized the map correctly, I think the power station should be Naruto forced a door open with a flick of his finger before carefully forcing away more dust. Making another dust rabbit in the corner, he got to work, fiddling with the controls until he rebooted the power. The lights flickered before staying on, illuminating the entire building with weak light. Looks like this place has enough power for maybe another week or so, Naruto grunted. Well, we gotta hurry if we want to find our ally, whoever they are. Request. Please step aside. I can be of some assistance. Naruto stepped aside, and HK knelt in front of one of the large computers. Placing his blaster down, HK flicked his wrist, and a large sharp scomp popped out from underneath his hand before he jammed it into the computer terminal. Scanning, HK muttered as he began diving through its vast amount of data until he stopped. Observation. I have located our ally, who is currently in carbon freeze in the basement. How long has he been in carbon freeze? Naruto frowned. Well, carbon freezing isn't exactly new. Back around Revan's time, the technology was rather crude and only really worked for non-living things. Any sentient being that got carbon frozen often died during or after the result. Answer. This subject has been carbon frozen for approximately 3,000 to 4,000 years, give or take. She is showing vitals, but it is currently hard to say whether she'll survive the release or not. Naruto flinched at this before he took a deep breath. Let's unfreeze her, then. If she dies, well, I suppose that's mercy. And if she survives, let's hope she's a worthy friend. Commentary. I do like the way you think, Master. The trip downstairs was a rather fast one due to HK knowing where he was going. It would have gone faster had Naruto not decided to reactivate a few cleaning droids due to how filthy the place had become. In the end, he decided to just keep the helmet on to filter out all the stale and dusty air, which HK noted that he should have just done in the first place. Ignoring the little jab, he kept quiet until they made it to the bottom. Searching through the countless stored and forgotten items, it only took a minute for HK to figure out where the carbon-frozen woman was. Well, here goes nothing, Naruto sighed as he pushed a few buttons. The frozen Twi'lek immediately began to thaw out with a loud hiss, smoke shooting out everywhere. She continued to thaw out for a full minute before she was finally free. She collapsed out of her coffin, prompting Naruto to swiftly catch her. He blinked before blushing as he realized that he was holding onto her breast. Come on, Naruto muttered as he gently lowered her onto the floor, noting just how cold she felt. Episis. This Twi'lek is suffering from hibernation sickness. Amazingly, she is still alive, but requires medical treatment. Right, Naruto muttered after checking her pulse. HK, where's the medical room? Alan opened her eyes slowly, revealing her glowing yellow irises. She shut them immediately as the light began digging into her retinas. Where her hazy mind managed to think. Where am I? You're free, a voice seemed to echo throughout the room. You're free from the carbon freeze. You're welcome. Blinking, she slowly lifted her head, her lekkus feeling as heavy as a starship. Finally managing to clear her vision, she saw a hooded man sitting across the room. "Who are you?" she slowly asked, shaking her head. "Professionally, I'm Darth QP," the masked man answered. He slowly raised his hands and lifted his helmet off of his head. Setting his helmet aside, she was stunned to see a pair of glowing red eyes with black slits. "But you can call me Naruto." "Strange name," Talon finally said, letting out a playful smirk. This earned her a snort from the fellow dark side user. "Well, humor aside, let's get to business, shall we? I'm a Sith, you're an ancient Sith from Force knows when, the Republic and the GD are ruling the galaxy and are doing a piss poor job of it. I want to help make things better by making me the sole ruler of the galaxy, but I need help. You in?" Darth Talon took a moment to process all of this. She closed her eyes and meditated, focusing on the dark side of the Force. It appeared that the man was telling the truth. There were so few of them Siths left in the galaxy, with the GD growing out of control. This alone was enough to tell her that the Sith lost the war and that this was their chance to strike back. "I'll accept," Darth Talon finally said, opening her eyes, on one condition. "That being? I want to measure your strength. I want to see if you're worthy of being my master." A bloodthirsty grin stretched across her pretty red face, revealing her white teeth. "Sure." Naruto tossed her something, and she quickly grabbed it with her left hand. Blinking, she realized that it was her lightsaber, something that she quickly realized she missed having by her side, despite just waking up from hibernation. "There's an arena Closaby. Let's settle things there." He stood up, putting on his helmet as he walked out the door. She followed suit, observing his stance and body. Quite an odd one we have here, she thought, admiring his well-trained body. Not completely dark, and yet, not quite so light either. She ignited her saber and moved to decapitate him. Hiss. Naruto activated his own lightsaber, casually blocking the fatal blow without looking. Let's save it for the arena," he waggled his finger, casually pushing away her red blade. He deactivated his sword and continued walking as if nothing happened. She smirked behind his back. "Looks like he's going to be fun," she thought, licking her lips. "Remember HK, no interfering in this match," he called out to his metallic friend. Statement. "I will not interfere in this match of yours," HK replied, his robotic voice speaking to him through Naruto's helmet. Naruto shed his robes, revealing his topless muscular form. Talon grinned in excitement as she shed her robes, revealing her barely clothed form. Naruto blushed a little from underneath his helmet, his eyes devouring the side of her beautiful red skin, which was covered in Sith tattoos. She was practically naked, save for her leather bra and loincloth. He felt his pants growing tight and he shook his head. Talon smirked at this. Still a boy in the end, she thought smugly. She brushed and flicked her leku like how human females did with hair. "You ready, young man?" she purred, igniting her lightsaber. "Always," Naruto grinned back from underneath his helmet, igniting his own blade. The two of them stared at each other, silence filling the air save for the soft humming of their deadly blades. Then, Naruto began to move. He slowly began moving to the right, circling the red Sith. She did the same, moving to her left as the two dared each other to make the first move. Finally, Talon struck first. "Hiya!" she screamed as she fired a wave of force lightning. Naruto countered by jumping high into the air, firing his own force lightning at her. Blocking his lightning with her lightsaber, she thrusted her hand at him, blasting him backwards. He landed harmlessly on the stadium, walking it off with some mild bruising. Jumping back into the fight, he launched his own barrage of force pushes, forcing Talon to dodge the invisible attacks. She moved like a graceful, deadly ballerina, seemingly dancing and flipping away from his attacks. Such deadly beauty, he must have her. Shadow clone jutsu. Puffs of smoke appeared around Talon, and she realized that she was looking at 5 more versions of the blonde Sith. Interesting, she breathed, genuinely impressed and curious. "What sort of force technique did you use?" "If you admit defeat, we'll tell you," the clone answered teasingly. She just gave them a savage grin, before twirling around. Naruto deflected her thrown lightsaber, watching as she lunged at a clone. The poor clone didn't survive her deadly kick to his head, making him pop like a balloon. If she was surprised at their fragility and how they dissipated, she didn't show it as she fired more force lighting at the other clones. Wham! Talon's breath left her lungs as something barreled into her, sending her flying backwards. She realized that in that small pocket of distraction, her foe the real one hit her with a force push. Growling, she called for her saber, when peeled. Her eyes widened as she saw a red and black plasma blade at her throat. Somehow, this man managed to get around her at speeds inhuman, even for a Sith. She gulped as she realized just how close his body was to hers. "I yield," she sighed, and her lightsaber fell back down where it laid. Naruto deactivated his blade, and she spun around, her clenched fist flying straight towards his. Slam. Darth Talon let out a choked cry of surprise as stars winked in her vision. She realized that Naruto had countered her surprise attack with one of his. Grabbing her face, he slammed her head down onto the sandy floor, sending a wave of pain pleasure up her lightly bruised lecus. "Are you done?" he asked her again, this time with no mirth in his voice. She couldn't see his face, but she could feel his dangerous aura licking at her, consuming her. It was then that she realized that she went too far, with his bloodlust now drowning in I yield, she breathed. A blush began forming on her cheeks as her crotch moistened, and she slowly began to reach for his helmet. He did and said nothing, curious to see what she would do. He felt no bloodlust from her, but still. "May I see your face, my master?" she breathed. "Alright," he permitted. She slowly removed his helmet, looking at his wild hair and eyes. Without warning, she leaned up and kissed him, her delicious, red lips reaching his pink pear. His eyes widened momentarily in surprise, before he closed them, allowing himself to fall prey to his carnal desires. His lust grew back at full strength, which was something the red Twi'lek didn't fail to notice. Letting out a sensual sigh, she slowly fondled his large tent. Quite an impressive lightsaber you got there, she purred. "May I open my gift?" Lemon scene happened. That's nothing. My old master used to do much worse." Talon squealed as Naruto channeled force lightning up his fingers, sending it directly into her most sensitive spot. Her mouth wide open, she let out a yell of pain and pleasure as he electrocuted her insides. Her expression of fury quickly warped into one of pleasure as she began to babble and drool mindlessly, her lecus twitching frantically as her brain was flooded with pleasure. She came again, endowing her new master with her scent and fluids. Not once did he stop his lightning, making sure that she came over and over again until her body could take it no longer. Eventually, she passed out, although her body still twitched from the stimulant overload. No longer was the proud Darth Talon. Instead, it was just Talon now, the first member of Darth Kurama's coven and harem. One could hardly believe her to be a formidable woman, with the image of a deadly Sith now replaced by a four who was still fumming despite being unconscious. "Holy shit, I didn't know I had it in me," Naruto breathed, slowly pulling his wet fingers out of her snatch. Looking down at his soaked fingers, he gave them a lick, nodding as if approving of a new dish. "So this is what the universe can offer me," Naruto realized, staring at his hands, before looking down at the fallen Sith below him. Not bad." Naruto's blank face turned into one of mad joy as he let out a cackle. More force lightning began to crackle and shoot out of his fingers as his laughter filled the forgotten temple. Commentary. "That was quite a performance, master." "Thanks, HK," he nodded as the assassin droid handed him a canteen of water. "I was quite surprised myself. I guess once you let go of your morals, you can achieve just about anything. I guess that's what Revan-sensei wanted me to know." Agreement. "I find morals and ethics to be invisible chains that hold everyone down, both heroes, villains, and everyone in between alike." "You said it, HK," Naruto sighed blissfully as he rubbed Talon's leku affectionately. They were back on the Black Sparrow, currently flying through hyperspace. Talon had woken up at some point, and upon realizing that she lost, this time she acknowledged her defeat, understanding his power over hers. "Hello, Mandalore," Darth QP sang. HK let out a purr of excitement. Talon continued to lap up his spilled semen while fingering herself, her eyes glowing with pleasure. Darth QP was pissed. Granted, he should have seen this coming, given how he was going to Mandalore, a planet full of batshit crazy warriors who have gone toe-to-toe with both the Jedi and the Sith, with the said warriors fighting for so long that their planet was essentially destroyed, but he didn't expect to be blasted and boarded right off the bat, especially in an era of supposed peace. Ah well. Darth Revan always did warn him that everyone always has some innocence left to lose. Thankfully, they weren't here to destroy their ship. Instead, they seemed to be here to steal and raid it. On one hand, it was slightly better than being blasted to a million pieces. On the other hand, he still made an embarrassing mistake in front of his new apprentice, and he wanted some payback. That's why he told her to stand back as he faced the helmed intruders who stepped on board. It was a team of 7 Mandalorians, both male and female, who had their blasters trained onto him. The few reasons why they haven't blasted him yet was that he didn't have his lightsaber out, he was alone, and he had his helmet on. Even though it wasn't designed with a modern T-visor they were well known for today, they still recognized a helmet of Mandalorian design. "Who are you? Identify yourself." The leader, a woman, ordered. "State your clan name." His eyes scanned her body and noted how, unlike the Mandalorians during the Old Republic, they chose to wear less metal on their body. According to the lectures Darth Revan gave him about the age of the Old Republic, they should have had more Beskar covering their body, and while that made them heavier and tired them out much faster, it also served to make each and every one of them a walking, flying tank. He wondered what had changed since then. Perhaps they found better, more efficient ways to fight, while also being minimalist with their precious metal. Maybe years of war drained them of their precious metals, forcing them to compromise. or perhaps peace has weakened them too. I am not a Mandalorian, he said, before cursing himself. Why in the name of the Force would he start with that? He couldn't see their faces, but he knew that all 7 of them were glaring at him. As much as the Mandalorian clans hated each other, every single one of them followed and respected this one code. Do not use Mandalorian equipment without strict permission from a Mandalorian. Penalty for that is usually instant death, no questions asked. That's why so few soldiers mercenaries dared using Western-made weapons, war armor similar in design to the Mandalorians, or even so much as spoke their language in fear of incurring the wrath of the nearest soldier of Mandalore. That's why he had to duck and flip out of the way to dodge a hail of blaster fire. But this helmet was a gift from my teacher. He finished, which, thank the Force, got them to stop shooting at him for now. The negative emotions directed at him didn't stop, however. And where did he get that helmet? One of the other Mandalorian warriors demanded. My master was Darth Revan, the Sith who walked in between the light side and the dark side of the Force. This got them to pause. Many years ago, during the age of the Old Republic, this helmet once belonged to a Mandalorian woman who stood up for the innocents, paying the price for her noble actions with her life. Slain by her own comrades, Darth Revan read her life story from a single touch and became inspired to end the pointless genocides caused by the Mandalorians at that time, swearing to never take it off until his job was done. The Mandalorians fell silent for a moment, no doubt pondering his words and presence. I am Darth Revan's apprentice, and I was given the task to help conquer the galaxy to bring order and stability. However, I am in need of strong warriors to help me in my quest. All I ask is an audience with your leader. POW. Criff. Darth QB swore as a blaster bolt nearly got him in the shoulder. We have no desire to fight a war we're not certain we can win, the leader calmly stated. We are still trying to rebuild our forces, and we don't need another Sith manipulating us into extinction again. The leader of the team suddenly found herself to be lacking oxygen. Gagging, she dropped her blaster as she was shot into the air, her head banging painfully against the metal ceiling. Ursa? One of them shouted, before he was shoved into the wall courtesy of a powerful force push. Why you? One of them roared as he fired a barrage of blaster bolts at him, only for the said bolts to be redirected into their own comrade. The victim of the redirected bolts was launched across the room, hurt but not slain yet, thanks to her armor. Whoom. One of them tried to sneak up on him with a flamethrower. The fire barely managed to lick at his robes before he blocked the stream of flames with a force shield, creating a wall of fire pressing against an invisible wall. Whoosh. Naruto stuck out his other hand to block a powerful blast of air that was shot out of Ambrose. This caused the ship to rattle from the continuous fighting. Enough. He roared as he slammed his fist down. Arcs of force lightning suddenly began to spread from the floor, quickly reaching all of the Mandalorians. They screamed in unison as the dark lightning crackled around their bodies, their invincible metal armor only doing so much for them. The waves of blue electricity ceased, giving them the sweet release from the agonizing electrocution. They fell onto their knees, with the weaker ones passing out on the spot. A skilled warrior would have seen and taken advantage of the precious few seconds this gave him, and Darth QB wasted no time. Finally igniting the blade, he moved like the wind, swiftly decapitating 3 of them in one fluid motion. No irk. Darth QB turned around and saw that Talon had apparently gotten bored of watching. Walking into the scene, she casually force-choked one of them, which had been playing possum. Crack. With a brutal snap, the 4th Mandalorian warrior fell back onto the floor, lifeless. Talon. What? I got bored, master, she shrugged before turning to the 3 surviving Mandalorians. She frowned when she realized that they were women. She raised her hand to finish them off as well. No, Talon. Her master grabbed her hand, stopping her in her tracks. We'll need some answers from them, so until I say otherwise, don't kill them. As you wish, Talon huffed. Ursa Wren groaned, her head pounding like hammer to metal. She's a strong one, a female voice she didn't recognize hissed. I can see why you would want her. Ursa blinked as her brain began to clear up. She looked around their surroundings and realized that they had lost the battle. Whoever the masked stranger was turned out to be a force user, and a rather powerful one at that as well. Rise and shine, Mandalorian, the red-skinned Twi'lek sneered at the last part, making Ursa frown. Be nice, Talon, the masked man appeared from behind her. They might be rude guests, but there's no need for us to share the same attitude. Talon pulled her head back, then winced as the man unexpectedly smacked her rear. It was then that Ursa realized that not only was her hands bound, but she was completely naked. Oh great, they're perverts, the leader of the Wren clan groaned internally. This is going to suck. Rise, the masked man commanded as he touched her friends on the head. Whatever mysterious force power he used worked, since the unconscious women stirred to life. It didn't take long for them to realize the mess they had gotten themselves into, and it didn't take long for them to also realize their current position. Rahab, the one with darker skin and with her dark brown hair covering her eyes, cursed at them in Mandalorian, while Casca Reeves just bit her lip in silent fury. Now, you're the ones who rudely invited yourselves onto my ship, the masked stranger scat at them. The least you can do is remain silent and hear my proposition. And why are we stripped naked now? Ursa managed to calmly ask. Judging from the poor performance, you Mandalorians have weakened over the years, the man observed. Nonetheless, you did put up a half-decent fight, proving your worth as Mandalorians. That being said, however, that still means that every part of you and your equipment is a weapon, so I couldn't leave anything to chance. Yeah, right. I bet all you want to do is just fape and conquer us, right? Rahab sneered at him. Well, tough shit, Gamorrean spawn, you'll get nothing out of us, especially with your puny lightsaber. If you want answers out of us, you'll need a lot more than your junk to make us talk. Bring it on. Lemon happened. Asuka's eyes widened momentarily as she came, her hips twitching as her back arched. Her eyes, which were full of fear, confusion, and panic, quickly turned murky again as they were replaced with bliss. Meanwhile, Ursa was struggling to free herself from her bonds, but found that she couldn't leave the room, nor could she try to break her cuffs off. I must get out of here. She thought as she frantically slammed her cuffed hands against a metal box. I must not let this filth taint my body. Her face lightened up as the cuffs finally broke off of her. They clattered to her naked feet, prompting the two Siths to look at her. They stared at each other for a moment before Ursa bolted. Running towards the masked Sith, she raised her fists to deliver a punch that she knew she would never land. Just before the fist could connect with the man's neck, she froze. Frowning, she let out a grunt as she tried to move her fist to drive it into this man's neck, but she found herself to be completely paralyzed. Coward, she gritted her teeth. Can't fight me without your special powers. Darth QB hummed at this, stroking the chin of his helmet. I see, how about a wager? He lazily flicked his finger and she gently floated to the opposite side of the room. Her naked rear kissed the cold wall and she shivered. It was then that she realized that she could move again. How about this? You beat me in a fist fight, fair and square, and I'll let you and your friends go. Lose, and, well, you'll join me. Deal. Warrior's honor or whatever. Ursa Wren glared at the Sith, lightly blushing at how his beep was shamelessly still hanging out of his pants, before she nodded. Splendid. It was then that he shed the rest of his clothes, putting aside his robes, shirt and pants. This left him with his helmet on, which he eventually took off as well. Ursa flinched at the sight. Sure, the man was handsome, with his strange whiskered scars, his rugged messy blonde hair, and with his white sharp teeth, but it was the eyes that threw her off. Honey, I thought the stories told of your kind having glowing yellow eyes, Ursa noted as they began circling each other. You'll find me to be a special case, QB replied, his voice like poison honey. I'm much stronger than those pathetic adrenaline junkies. Ursa let out a yell as she ran towards him. Throwing a punch, she missed as he leapt to the side. Smack. Ursa let out a gasp gag as he slammed a fist into her gut. Gritting her teeth, she allowed herself to fall as she suddenly executed a spin kick. DCHK. QB hissed as he barely managed to dodge the attack. Her heel managed to graze his naked shin, which hurt. Hiya. Ursa swung her leg at him, forcing him to duck the high kick. His eyes went to her exposed crotch, making him whistle in admiration, before he punched the back of her knee. The Mandalorian woman fell over, and the whiskered Sith pounced on her. She shrieked, punching and kneeing him as hard as she could, but if he felt the pain, he seemed to be simply drinking it in, allowing it to fuel him as his grip on her tightened even harder. Her cheeks flushed as she felt something hard and soft graze her thighs. She didn't have to look downward to know that it was his man thing. Ursa's eyes widened as she got an idea. Okay, you win. She breathed, making him pause. Just please be gentle. He smirked as he began to angle his beak to penetrate her sacred area. Gotcha. Ursa yelled as she slammed her knee diagonally into his crotch. Slam. Ursa cursed. She tasted metal. Stars winking in her vision, she struggled to figure out what just happened. Very clever, the Sith above her hissed slowly. Her vision slowly clearing up, she realized that in horror, her little cheap shot hadn't worked the way she wanted to. His eyes glowing with pain and anger, he struggled to keep his breath steady as one of his hands protectively cupped his sore testicles. His other hand was clenched, high up in the air, covered in a small amount of blood. Slam. Even in her now further dazed state, she knew that he struck her again, her skull bouncing off the metal floor with a loud clang. But it's like I told you, I'm a very special case. His eyes seemed to ripple and glow with power and hatred as he finally raised his hand from his crotch. Much to her horror, whatever damage she might have done was reversed, with his beat now back at full staff. Now choose. Whatever mirth that was left in his voice disappeared as he summoned his weapon. Igniting it, she stared at the red and black plasma blade in both horror and wonder as it grew closer to her neck. Death or servitude. For a moment, she seriously considered death. It was, after all, a much better fate than what he had in mind. On the other hand, she glanced at her two remaining companions. They had tried their hardest too, and yet, they didn't quit. Plus she still had her family back home. "I yield," she sighed, her muscles relaxing in defeat. A tear rolled down her eye as she said this. But the Sith above her grinned before pushing his will into her. She gritted her teeth as his beat pushed through her tight walls. Shit, why did it have to feel so good? Ursa cursed at herself. Due to her duties as leader of Clan Ren, the last time she had sex, it was the night her daughter was conceived. Whatever damage her husband did to her beef had long been recovered, making her as tight as a virgin. She wished for her husband to feel her warmth and tightness again, and had even planned on throwing herself onto him after this patrol mission, and now that was ruined by this monster who was raping her. She bit her tongue in an effort to hold back a squeak of pain and pleasure. Despite her strong mind, her body betrayed her by beginning to embrace this new being. I see your husband hasn't funked you in a while," the blonde Sith grinned before pinching her nipples. "Shut up," she bit back, trying to look away from his alluring red-slitted eyes. "We've been busy with our duties." "Doing what?" QB grunted, thrusting in and out of the Mandalorian heiress. "You clans are foolishly divided by jealousy, greed, or whatever other sins justifies your endless wars. Aside from training, restocking, and preparing, you should not be that busy to not spend time with your family, unless." His fingers crept over her forehead, and his grin widened even further. "Ah, so Death Watch still lives, huh?" The Sith Lord seemed amused at this. "Looks like you folks can get along after all." Ursa bit her lip but said nothing to deny this. Well, looks like today is my lucky day after all," he grunted as he thrusted into her one last time. Her eyes widened as she felt his hot seed pour into her, invading her sacred spot that she had only given to her husband. "Did you just fum in me?" Ursa snarled, the fire returning in her eyes. "How dare you eat?" Before she could have a chance to properly snap at him, he shoved his fingers deep inside her used funt. "What are you?" she started, but then widened her eyes as she realized too late what was going to happen. "No. C. Ursa let out a scream as QB sent out a weak pulse of force lightning into her beep. Well, it wasn't as potent as it was before, it was still pure electricity invading the most sensitive part of her body. Letting out a shriek, her back arched backwards as she came like a broken fountain. Pure pain. Pure pleasure. Pure ecstasy. That was the only thinking she could think of as the lightning reached her brain. Grinning like a madwoman, her eyes rolled to the back of her skull as she came non-stop. Wow, she must be quite pent up, Talon purred, enjoying the look of mad ecstasy on her face. It was a full minute before QB mercifully stopped the torture of pleasure. The minute he pulled his soaked fingers out from her snatch, she finally slumped downwards, twitching a little. Foam and drool leaked out of her mouth as she let out small pants of laughter. "Ursa Ren. Come in, Ursa." QB playfully waved his hand above her ahegao face. She didn't show any signs of consciousness, especially when her fluids fell onto her fair skin. "Well then, don't mind if I do." He pressed his hand over her head and channeled his will into her. Her eyes widened once before her body slumped over. I see." QB stroked his naked chin. It was beginning to sport a thin beard, making him over if he should shave it or not. So after Death Watch tricked the GD into doing their dirty work, they've been in hiding ever since, building up their numbers. Yes, Ursa Ren flinched as his fingers flicked at her clit again. "We are attempting to try to recruit the other clans under Pre-Vizsla's rule so that Mandalore can finally be unified. However, even with the Darksaber in his hands, many refused to accept his rule." "Interesting," the Sith Lord purred, ignoring the big-tittied tomboy Mandalorian woman who was giving him a titfink while Casca ate her out. The said tomboy woman's eyes twitched underneath her messy hair at being ignored and doubled her efforts to make him fum. "Last I've checked, a certain armor was needed to be the rightful ruler of Mandalore. I suppose with that armor being lost, I suppose the lightsaber from the first Mandalorian GD became its replacement." Summoning his own lightsaber, he ignited it, his sword emitting its red and black light. "Tell me, what happens if I happen to obtain both?" Ursa swallowed at the idea, a sweat running down her head. "Then all of Mandalore would follow you." "Interesting." Darth QB smirked as he pushed down Rahab's head, making her choke on his beep. "Very interesting indeed." In the pilot's seat, Darth Talon twitched at the sounds of those Mandalorian fours moaning. Her legs rubbed together, already missing its master's beep. Her thoughts were interrupted when a large white planet appeared into view. She smirked. They had made it to Crownest, the home of Clan Ren. "Ahem, is this thing on?" the helmed figure asked. After someone replied to him from out of range, the mysterious figure continued. "Hello there, my name is Darth QB, the last apprentice of Darth Revan, and approximately 24 hours ago, I was rudely boarded by Death Watch. The audience of this recorded message held their collective breaths as they already began to connect the dots. Obviously, I won this little skirmish, and, well, they didn't. He then held up a certain helmet that made the others gasp, growl in shock or anger. Somewhere in the crowd, a young woman's lips curled into uncontrollable rage, her fists clenched as she mindlessly reached for her blaster. Anyways, after some interrogation, I've discovered where Clan Ren resides. By the time you've received this message, it'll be far too late for you to save them. The man's chuckles turned harsh and warped from under his helmet. I'm on my way to you guys, where we can settle things once and for all. And sure, try to blast me out of the sky, but since I'll be bringing some guests, you won't have a body to bury, so have fun with that thought. See you soon. And with that, the holo transmission ended. POW. Everyone jumped as a blaster shot rang through the air. The mural on the wall depicting their family history had a smoking hole on it, courtesy of the princess of Clan Ren. Sabine. I'll fix it later, Tristan, Sabine said through gritted teeth. Who knows what horrible tortures that Sithspit has done to our people. Then it's best we save our ammo for that man, Ulrich Ren said coolly. They looked towards their father and flinched. While he kept his cool casual demeanor he would always put on, their unbridled rage in his eyes that threatened to burn a while through the floor. Tristan, make sure that none of our patrols gun down any incoming ships. Well, I can't trust anything that man says, if there is the slightest chance that some of our men might still be alive, then I won't risk friendly fire. Tristan's face turned dark, but he nodded, already activating his holo transceiver to deliver the message. The rest of you prepare for battle. The entire clan of Ren roared in determination as they rushed to their stations. The black and grey IT-1300 light freighter landed onto one of their landing ports. The large ship wound up carelessly knocking aside one of their fighter starjets, much to their ire. Still, they held back the temptation to simply blast the ship out of oblivion, their cannons trained onto the ship. The freighter's door slowly opened and someone stepped out from the smoke. Or rather, someone was slid out. Mother. Sabine's eyes widened under her helmet as she saw the humiliating state her mother was in. Bound to a floating metal slab was her mother, naked as the day she was born. Don't look. She managed to stammer, with most of them having the courtesy to look away from her shameful state. She shivered as a gust of wind blew by, and it was then that her husband and Sabine realized just how used and wet she was. Arth. Have you done this to my wife? Ulrich Ren roared, making Sabine and Tristan flinch. And so much more, said Sithpert as he finally walked down the steps, although not without a few more of his companions. Following him was a red-skinned Twi'lek with black tattoos around her body. Judging by her scandalous outfit and her glowing yellow eyes, she was not only his personal foe, but his apprentice as well. But the Mandalorians were more focused on the other two prisoners hostages he held. Rahab, the strongest Amazonian woman of the Night Owls, was also bound and displayed shamefully to the world, the vile man's semen still leaking out of her used holes. Oddly enough, she looked more turned on than ashamed. Then there was Casca Reeves, who didn't look much better. Her normally braided hair was in a mess, her dreadlocks now turned into a wild mess, black mascara running down her cheeks. She simply closed her eyes as she shivered in the cold, trying hard to keep her dignity. Ulrich's hands trembled as they struggled to not squeeze the trigger. How dare you? How dare I? How dare they? I was just minding my own business, trying to have a nice chat with you guys, when these dudes decided to try to pirate me. If anything, I'm being quite merciful, returning them home safe and sound. Safe? You call this safe? Sabine shrieked, barely containing her fury. They're still alive, aren't they, dear? The red Twi'lek shrugged, twirling her leku between her fingers. Why you? Tristan snarled, but Ulrich raised his hand up. Enough. So what do you want? The man bit his lip hard enough to taste metal. Well, what anybody wants whenever they see a good warrior. Your services. What do you have to offer? Ulrich asked. Oh, you know, the same thing everyone offers. Power. Control over the galaxy. To spread your awesome warrior ways. Money. All that good stuff. Only thing is I intend to win. What makes you any different from the other Siths our ancestors fought for and again? Well. Enough. Sabine stepped forward, both blasters in hand. Sabine, don't. I can't just let this monster humiliate us like this and just take it. No, if he wants control of our clan, he'll have to fight us for it. Some of her clan members looked at her in shock, while the others looked on with admiration. Ulrich was about to protest against this until the Sith just laughed. Ah, good, very good, the masked Sith purred. Such is the spirit of a Mandalorian. I expected nothing less. Fine, I suppose when in Mandalore, do as the Mandalorians do. He moved away from the hostages, cracking his head with a loud pop. So, who's my opponent? Sabine and Tristan Ren, who were next in line to lead Clan Ren, volunteered to take him. He told them that he was fine with taking on the father too, but apparently he wasn't a fighter. Surprising. You don't deserve to wear that helmet, Sith, Sabine spat. Even your master took it off of a dead corpse he himself didn't slay. You have no right to be wearing it. Might makes right. Darth QB just shrugged, his hands in the air. Justice, morality, good, evil, all those ideas goes out the window the moment any of our three factions go to war. We all justify our means, but in the end woe. Having enough of his monologue, Tristan fired his pistol at him. The Sith merely sidestepped, the blaster bolt nearly getting him in the neck. Smart. Attack while the enemy's distracted and aim for the weak points. Good, very good. He was cut off again as Sabine fired a barrage of blaster bolts. He dodged the bolts, but a few struck his chest. Ooh, wow. Feisty. Just like her mother. Darth QB taunted, making Sabine shriek in rage. He tossed aside his cloak, revealing that he was wearing one of the fallen Clan Ren's armor. Why you, Tristan roared, and he threw a few thermal detonators at him. To his surprise, he simply ran towards them, ducking and even swatting away the detonators with his hand. Die. Sabine ignited her jetpack, flying towards the Sith. Her pistols were out and peppered the blonde with the deadly bolts. He suddenly turned around and embraced the bolts. It struck him in the chest, head, and arms. Most were absorbed by the armor, but she noticed that a few struck flesh. And yet. Shit. Sabine screamed in her head as he grew dangerously close to her. Why won't you die? Were her last words before he drop-kicked her in the chest. While her armor protected her from the kick, gravity still kicked in as it dragged her back into the wall. Her head slammed into the wall behind her, and she slumped over. Sabine. Tristan roared, and he slammed his fist onto his gauntlet. Tristan, don't. Whoom. Tristan ducked down as his jetpack missile roared to life, hurling itself towards the armored Sith. Going all out, huh? Much to their surprise, he stopped in his tracks and raised his arms threateningly at the missile. Bring it. Boom. Before the other Mandalorians could process what had just happened, Tristan's missile collided directly into the Sith's chest. Did he just? Not sure if that's ballsy or just stupid. In the background, Darth Talon watched in the background. She bit her lip in slight worry, unsure what his plan was. Beskar armor or not, a missile to the chest would still be fodder. Ha 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 ha. The smoke cleared, and much to their shock, the Sith was still standing. His cloak now burned away, it revealed his concealed body and something else. What the hell are you? Tristan fell onto his knees, shakingly staring at his opponent. His pistols dropped to the floor as his fingers lost all grip. The man in front of them was glowing with power. Demonic, red-orange power shielded the Sith from the missile, acting as its own energy barrier. It could have been just him, but he could have sworn that this energy shield glared at him with glowing red eyes. I am Darth QB. The energy field faded away, leaving a smoking Sith warrior standing, his arms raised. The last apprentice of Darth Revan, I am the chosen Sith destined to rule the galaxy. Now. His form blurred as he sped towards Tristan, and just as he managed to grab a hold of his pistols again, Darth QB's boot planted right into Tristan's helmet, sending him flying back just like his sister. His visor shattering, he slumped over, defeated and unconscious. Well, that takes care of that. Brushing off his hands, he turned towards the rest of the Ren clan, who just watched in amazement and horror at the unusual battle that took place. So who's with me? After a second of hesitation and silence, the rest of the warriors knelt to their new leader. What happened? Sabine's eyes shot wide open as she leapt onto her feet. She reached for her weapons, but stopped as a familiar hand landed on hers. No, Sabine. It was her mother. Mother? Are you alright? No, I suppose not. She gave her daughter a bitter smile as she turned her head back forward. Sabine followed her gaze, and her heart nearly stopped as she saw her brother and father on their knees, stripped of their weapons, armor, clothes, and pride. Behind them was the Sith warrior, who stood behind them with an awful smirk on his admittedly handsome face. Good evening, you two, the red-eyed Sith smirked. Now, by Mandalorian rules, since I won the battle, I now rule over your clan. And such, I can do as needed, which includes executing the traitors. His lightsaber ignited, nearly grazing Alrich's scalp. These two in particular refused to kneel, and such, they'll die with honor. Please watch and don't make the same mistakes as these two. He raised his saber to decapitate the two men. No. No. The Sith smirk turned into a frown as he saw Sabine on her hands and knees. And who are you to order me around? You lost, didn't you? You no longer have the right to order anyone around unless I say so. Now. Please. This time, it was her mother who fell onto her hands and knees, bowing to him for the mercy of their family. Please spare their lives. I'll do anything. I already have control of one powerful Mandalorian clan. I certainly won't need your help in persuading the others, do I? Maybe not, Ursa Wren nodded shakingly, but I can be your puppet ruler for this clan, since you'll undoubtedly unite the others. That, and I can make sure to keep the rest of your men under check. And. She let out a gulp before she slowly shed her robes. The soft fabric tossed aside, her naked, abused body was once again on full display to the Sith, making him chuckle, while Tristan and his father could only look away. Mother Sabine's eyes darkened under her hair as she slowly stood up. Wordlessly, she began to shed her clothes as well, discarding her armor, weapons, and dignity. Much to his shame, Tristan accidentally took a look before he jerked his head away. His body, however, had no such shame. Ho ho, looks like someone has a sister complex, the Sith Lord teased. Tears began pooling from his eyes as his manhood shamelessly rose to full mast. Or maybe your entire clan of men are into cuckoldry. The hand suddenly seized Alrich's crotch, making him whimper. He opened his eyes to see the red Twi'lek grinning at him as she painfully held onto his erection. Alan, mind if you watch over these two as I give them their punishment for their defiance. Yes, master, she purred as she slid around the two men, wrapping her arms around their necks as she pulled them closer together. So, Ursa, Sabine, do you promise to be good girls from now on? Yes, my lord, the two of them said in shaky union. We're at your eternal service. Good, QB purred, walking around behind them. Lemon scene happened. Statement. We have arrived at Concordia, young, virile master. Right, the Sith sighed as he stood up. Answer the transmission, please. The HK pushed a button, and a voice crackled into their radio. This is Pre Vizsla of Concordia. Who are you and please state your purpose? I'm here to speak to the leader of Death Watch. You see, I'm here to challenge him into a duel. Can you get me to him? The line went silent for a moment, most likely due to how blunt he was. Look, before you try to bullshit your way out of this, I fought the Night Owls and kicked their asses, replacing Ursa as the leader of the Ren clan in the process. I'm coming for you now for a fair, one-on-one fight. And before you think about blasting me out of the sky, just know that I have a small army of Mandos who can vouch for me, including some of their elites as well. I think you can figure out the rest. Before Vizsla could say another word, the Sith hung up. Do you want us to get naked, or? Rahab asked slowly. As fun as that would be, no, please put your armor back on. Phooey. What? What? Darth QB and his army landed in Concordia without incident. Exiting their spaceships, it quickly became clear to the rest of Death Watch that he was not fibbing, as indicated by how he was in front of the line, followed by his new army behind him. Waiting for him was a man with similar blue armor, bearing the sigil of Death Watch onto his shoulder cape. So, it looks like you weren't all talk. The Mandalorian removed his helmet to reveal a light-skinned man with silver eyes. His head looked recently shaven, most likely as preparation for their battle. You'll find that I have a lot more than words in my arsenal, the masked Sith chuckled before he removed his helmet too. I'm going to go out on a limb and assume you're not of Mandalorian origin. The man sneered. No, I'm not, the blonde man admitted. However, times have changed, and historically speaking, you Mandalorians are willing to change with the times if needed or desired. In this hypothetical instance, would they rather choose a leader that's weaker than the alternative, despite the fact that the said alternative can provide so much more than what, say, you can? Pre Vizsla scowled at this jab, but he surprisingly didn't refute this. If anything, I would say that sword of yours or even the Mask of Mandalore doesn't cut it anymore, the Sith continued. I mean, if that sword was all it took to rule all of Mandalore, then you wouldn't be here hiding in this dusty moon while some others decide to rebel against you, right? Even in Mandalore, it looks like there's some level of democracy desired. The two factions shifted nervously as the two leaders stared each other down. What do you promise if you do win? Pre Vizsla finally asked, curiosity momentarily overtaking his pride. Well, for one, I'd restore Mandalore to its former glory, culturally and on a planetary scale, the Sith declared. I mean, for the love of the Force, you people destroyed your own planet for power. It's honestly a bit depressing to look at its current state right now, with those life domes being the only way you people could have a chance of surviving in there. This got some of the surrounding Mandalorians to murmur amongst themselves. Well, he certainly wasn't the first to dream about Mandalore being rich with forests again, not many actually bothered to openly promise this dream. I hope you have more to offer than your little gardening project, Pre Vizsla frowned. Otherwise, this will be a humiliating match. That's just one of the many rewards I have to offer, the Sith continued. I intend on conquering this galaxy in order to crush the Republic that has lost its way. I intend to create an empire for peace and stability. The catch here, however, is that I would like for you Mandalorians to be able to expand your culture, your technology, and your way of living all across the galaxy. No longer will you remain the shadows to grasp at the small riches the galaxy has left to offer. No, you will get your rightful place as the apex predator of the galaxy, ruling with a fist made of Beskar. You and your men and women will become the great enforcers of peace and justice throughout the galaxy. But until then, are you willing to stay hidden in the shadows of the Republic? He waved his hand around at the darkening environment as night began to fall. "You have an ambitious dream, Sith Lord," Pre-Vizsla finally said as he put his helmet back on. "However, goals are just words until they're achieved. So." He reached for his back and withdrew a lightsaber hilt. Igniting the laser sword, a flat black blade erected from the handle. "Enough talk, let's fight." "Agreed." The Sith Lord ignited his saber, and the two let out a roar as they charged at one another. Crash. Hiss. Crash. Sparks of energy crackled as the two blades met one another. With another yell, Pre-Vizsla leapt back as he threw down a handle of explosives. Boom. 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 Just before impact, the Sith leapt back to avoid the explosion, which kicked up a cloud of dust and smoke. POW. 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 Darth QB had no time to rest as the Mandalorian fired a barrage of plasma bolts at him, forcing him to either dodge, sidestep, or block some of them. Yarg. Pre-Vizsla leapt out of the smoke, the darksaber in his hand as he tried to cut the man down with his blade. But his mighty sword was blocked with his opponent's saber with a casual sidestep and a parry. "Why would you yell before the ambush?" QB tilted his head. "Ruins the whole point of the ambush, wouldn't you agree?" Gritting his teeth from underneath his helmet, Vizsla suddenly closed the distance as he tried to impale the Sith with his vibroknife. Bam. Vizsla let out a cry of pain as he found himself struggling to stay on both legs. Before his other blade could sink into the small gaps in his opponent's armor, a rather painful sidekick was planted into his thigh, one of the least guarded areas of his body. "Tell me, how long have you Mandalorians fought against each other?" Darth QB asked mockingly as he directed another kick to his armored chin. "How much of your legendary metal has been wasted on each other when you could have used it to conquer the galaxy? How often did you pick the wrong side simply out of pride or tradition or greed?" "Silence, outsider." Vizsla roared as he flung a thermal detonator into his face. Before it could go off, a quick stroke of his unique lightsaber severed it into two before it could detonate. "How long have you people wasted away in the shadows, wilting while the others grew in the light? The Hutts have lost their warrior ways, and yet they live on, expanding their filthy empire. You people are still the legendary warriors history writes you to be, and yet even you lot bow your heads towards them for a quick coin. Tell me, O rightful leader of Mandalore, what are you doing wrong?" I said silent irk. Before the leader of Death Watch could shout any further, the Sith threw a quick jab into his unguarded throat, the knuckles of his bent fingers digging into the soft flesh through his soft, useless neck guard. He fell down gagging, and before he could get up, a powerful soccer kick sent his helmet flying off to another direction. He tried to raise his sword to fend him off, but a quick stroke of his saber sent his severed arm flying off into another direction. "You really needed to train harder," the Sith sighed. "Not just with the sword, but with fighting too. If you were up against a common grunt you might have done alright, but against even the Republic's softened GD? I don't think so." Pre-Vizsla's jaw turned bone wide as he clutched at his missing arm. He scrambled backwards and turned to the others. His face fell a little when he saw their disappointed expressions, the gazes cutting deep even through their helmets. "Any last words?" the Sith asked as he raised his sword. "Long live Mandalore," the defeated soldier said as he closed his eyes. And with a quick deadly stroke, he met his end. "So, I believe that settles that," the Sith let out a small grin as he summoned his trophy and his helmet. He ignited the dark Excalibur, raising it into the air. "So, who shall follow me to victory?" The Mandalorians all looked at each other for a moment before they all knelt. There was a red-deeded Mandalorian who looked hesitant about this before she stood tall and firm. "Never," she yelled. "We'll never follow an outsider like you." This earned her a few glares from the other Mandalorians as they raised their guns at her and her rebellious group, but he simply raised his hand. "No need," he smiled from underneath his helmet. "I understand that you have some disagreements and hesitance. Which is fine, since, like you said, I am an outsider. So, how about this? I will help you all regain control of the Mandalorian government within a week. If I fail to do so, you are all free to leave me or overthrow me. But if I succeed, well, what's the harm of seeing this through the end?" He slowly walked up to the true leader of the Night Owls, Bo-Katan, if he remembered correctly, who just gave him a defiant glare. Deactivating his prize, he raised a hand towards her as he granted them a choice. After a long tense minute, she finally shook it. "Great." He grinned. "Now, come on. Where are your headquarters? We've got some planning to do." The Mandalorians didn't know it yet, but this would be one of the most harrowing moments in history. End chapter. So this part ends here. If you want to see next part of this series, like the video now and share the story with your friends. Bye bye.